Hello and welcome to the program. The second National Security and Defense Hackathon has kicked off in Kyiv. During the 5 days of the competition, IT specialists and NATO experts will be developing and testing defense programs. The winners will have an opportunity to participate in NATO meetings and to learn the newest trends in data exchange. Joining us in the studio to talk more about this is Terry McCoy, Interoperability Standards Section Head, Federated Interoperability Branch. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here.
Happy to be here.
So, can you tell us a bit about NATO's role in this hackathon?
Yeah, so this hackathon was modeled after the NATO, it's referred to as Tide Sprint. It's a think tank that we hold twice a year. And along with that think tank, we have a hackathon. And so nations are invited to participate in the hackathon. Ukraine has participated several times in the past and done very well. And
what sort of roles do the teams play? Are there strategic alliances, or what, can you give us a rundown?
So it's actually a competition. Now teams can collaborate, and which is very common, and they'll have a neutral team that kind of helps with the teams that are competing to give them ideas, and then and they're all generally very bright young programmers that are given a problem to solve, a challenge as they refer to it, and there'll be 3 challenges generally, and they'll pick one, and then at the end they'll be judged, and I'm one of the judges, and then we'll determine whether they met the challenge, and then during the challenge often we'll give them an additional piece to work on after they've started, just to kind of complicate it a little bit. But it's a lot of fun for them and good collaboration, and they come up with solutions, and that's what we're looking for, rapidly prototype things that may be, expanded on in the future. It wouldn't be something you'd put in production, but it's a good lead into something.
So how many NATO experts are taking part in this hackathon, and what sort of roles do they play, and do they kind of provide any guidance perhaps?
So we've got probably, I think it's about 6 of us that are there, and a couple of us, like I mentioned, are judges, and then we also participate in what's called the white team, and so we're kind of mentors for them, and we'll give them, because we have insight regarding what the challenges are. And for example, this challenge has to do with land command and control. And so I'm a command and control expert is the reason that I'm here. And then one of the other judges and also one of the mentors, he actually wrote one of the original programs that goes along with one of the challenges. And then another guy from Britain he's not exactly a NATO guy, but he participates in NATO working groups all the time. And he's also, but then we have guys from our Communications and Information Agency from The Hague. And there's a team of them that are actually producing their own solution, but then they're doing it as a non-competitor, and also mentoring the other guys that are actually competing.
So you're one of the judges. What are some of the kind of aspects and strategies and sort of work that you pay attention to? The most?
Yeah, we want to be sure, because in the challenge it gives a criteria, and so everybody interprets criteria differently, and so if they've met all of the criteria, and then how innovative they were, because you can just come up with like a traditional solution that really isn't very innovative. And we're really looking for innovation, because part of what my command does, Allied Command Transformation, is we're the innovation command. So we're really looking for new, bright ideas that we can, like I said, pursue with our agency out of The Hague. The engineers there maybe come up with a grander solution to help NATO and its command and control for its militaries.
So just to give a bit of a backstory for our viewers, there are 3 types of tasks. So modeling, coding, and combining.
Right.
And so one of the main tasks is to create a program that will input data into drones and other different equipment that may be found in combat zones, and process it, analyze it, and create a specific code for it so it won't be intercepted.
Right.
Is that how it's done?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's one. So the 3 tasks. One is to actually transmit what are called tasks and orders. Okay. A second one, they're actually putting information on a map. And so you'll have what are referred to as symbols, and it has to be in accordance with the NATO standard for those symbols. And then the third one is taking, it's a type of protocol that allows you to transfer, I don't want to get too technical, but
please don't.
Yeah, okay, but transfer it into a computer language that can be shared across different, what are referred to as domains, and that way people can share information.
I think one of the things to understand better on how that works and how perhaps Ukrainian teams are incorporating some of the things that they learn during the hackathon is to talk a bit about some of the threats that perhaps Ukrainians have been facing, and if there's perhaps any advice that you provide on how to deal with certain cyber attacks.
Mm-hmm. That's really kind of outside of what we're doing here as far as, we'll talk about cyber because, for example, there's a cyber roundtable that we're going to participate in, but that's not really part of the challenge. So even though we'll have discussions about that, that's not specifically part of the hackathon challenge. But then, as far as just the advice, that's really kind of outside of the things that I would probably, be comfortable discussing here.
Of course, yeah. No, I understand. Please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't. So, why is it important for for the Ukrainian Border Guard, for the National Guard, for the Security Service, for the police? Why is it important for them to take part in the hackathon?
And so that's what I kind of refer to as the cross domain. And so you have all these different agencies and military that at some point have to share information. And so what this is allowing them to do is discover common ways to share that information because, generally speaking, military talks to military. And then, you may even have a different protocol, if you want to call it, between the Guard, security services, and we call it stovepiping. So everybody's in their unique, area, and they share information very well within their area. But then if you got to share it across, that's where the challenge is. And that's what these challenges are all about is determining how to do that. Write a computer language that's going to let you share across those different domains.
So a sort of communication?
Communication. It's really computer to computer. That's what it's designed for.
So what are some of the issues that Ukrainian teams are working on to comply with NATO standards?
So we give them the standard. So one of the standards is the standard for those symbols that I mentioned earlier. So when you put symbols on a map, let's say it's a headquarters of some kind, it'll have a unique symbol in accordance with what's called a standard NATO agreement, a STANAG. And so those are published, and all the NATO nations and partner nations adhere to those standards in order to be able to share information like that.
And so that's something that Ukrainian different military and security services are working on.
Absolutely.
So in your opinion, what areas does the Ukrainian army perhaps needs to improve in order to reach NATO standards and perhaps one day work alongside NATO forces?
I think it's just to focus on, those specific standards that I mentioned. And there's even a larger component of that called Federated Mission Networking that is bigger than NATO. And NATO participates in that. NATO has 29 nations. And the FMN, as they call it, has 35 nations, including NATO as one of those affiliates. And so adhering to those specifications, this is what they're referred to, is will make them, if you want to say, interoperable, because that's the big term, is interoperability.
And what kind of goals are you hoping that some of these young men and women will achieve as a result of taking part in the hackathon?
It's really all about the innovation and the creativity. So for them to come up with a coherent, relatively simple solution that's easy to use. So if it's user friendly, because whenever you're dealing with the operational forces, you can't make it too complicated. So it's got to be something that, just a normal soldier, sailor, Marine airman can, sit down at a computer and be able to use without having to have, a whole bunch of extra training. You always require training. But if you can make it, where it's understandable enough so that you can just kind of intuitively use it, that's what we're looking for.
But not easy enough, or rather complicated enough for enemies not to be able to decipher.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit different area because whenever you secure your information, they use cryptology. There's different ways to secure things. I mean, it's just like whenever you go into your bank account. I mean, that's a secure way to exchange your banking information. Well, the same thing happens in the military. So we have unique systems and software that create that environment, so it's safe to exchange information.
Very interesting discussion. Thank you very much for taking the time to come in today.
You're very welcome.
We've been joined by Terry McCoy, Interoperability Standards Section Head, Federated Interoperability Branch, and you're watching UATV.